Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Speech balloon, before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. Send the invitation to Elena Rivers, Daniel Cross commanded, his voice cutting through the mahogany-paneled boardroom like a blade. Make sure she knows it's black tie. I want her to see exactly what she walked away from. His assistant, Margaret, hesitated at the conference room door. Sir, are you certain this is? Did I stutter? Daniel's steel-gray eyes flashed with the kind of cold fury that had built Cross Industries from the ground up. 5 years ago, she chose her principles over our future. Now I want her to witness what real success looks like. The phone buzzed in his palm before Margaret could respond. Elena's number, still burned into his memory despite half a decade of trying to forget, appeared on the screen. The invitation hadn't even been sent yet, but somehow she was calling him. Daniel. Her voice carried none of the trembling uncertainty he'd expected. Instead, it held something that made his chest tighten with unrecognizable emotion. I got your message. What message? He hadn't sent anything yet. The one about the charity gala. About how you wanted to catch up and show me your new world. There was a pause, and he heard something that sounded like children giggling in the background. I'll be there. Daniel's blood ran cold. He'd drafted the cruel invitation in his head, planned every humiliating detail, but hadn't actually sent it yet. How could she possibly know? Elena, I didn't. Saturday night, 7 p.m., right? The Grand Metropolitan. Her voice carried an edge of something he couldn't identify. Amusement? Challenge? Don't worry, Daniel. I'll dress appropriately for the occasion. The line went dead, leaving him staring at his phone with his heart hammering against his ribs. Margaret stood frozen in the doorway, invitations still clutched in her manicured fingers. Sir, she whispered, should I still send this? Daniel's mind raced. Somehow Elena had anticipated his cruelest impulse, had known he would try to humiliate her. But how? And why did she sound so confident? No, he said finally, though his voice cracked on the word. Cancel it. Cancel everything. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. Whatever game Elena was playing, she was already 3 moves ahead. Hi there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel that brings you stories that will absolutely change how you see love, betrayal, and the price of pride. I'm so glad you're here with me today because this story is going to take us on an emotional journey that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about success, family, and second chances. Today we're diving into a tale about Daniel Cross, a man who thought wealth could erase the past, and Elena Rivers, a woman whose secrets would bring an empire to its knees. But this isn't just about money or power. It's about the children who hold the key to everything, and the moment when a man's entire world shifted with just 2 little hands reaching for their father. So settle in, grab your favorite drink, and prepare yourself for a story that proves sometimes the most devastating victories come from the battles we never saw coming. 3 hours earlier, Elena Rivers had been reading bedtime stories to her 5-year-old twins when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was brief, brutal in its simplicity. Charity gala this Saturday. Come see what real success looks like. D. She'd stared at the screen for a full minute before the laughter started. Not bitter or broken, but rich with genuine amusement. Lucas, her son, looked up from his picture book with concern. Mama, why are you laughing? Because sometimes, sweetheart, people make assumptions that are so wrong they become funny. Elena ruffled his dark hair that carried the exact same stubborn cowlick as his father's. Tell me, what do you and Sophia want to wear to a fancy party? Sophia, never one to be left out of conversation, bounced on the bed. The blue dress with sparkles. Can we really go to a party, Mama? We can indeed. Elena's smile held secrets that would have terrified Daniel Cross if he could have seen it. It's time you two met some old friends of Mama's. What Daniel didn't know, what he'd never bothered to discover in his arrogant certainty, was that Elena Rivers hadn't just survived the last 5 years. She'd thrived. The struggling artist he remembered had evolved into the creative director of Rivers and Associates, the boutique marketing firm that had quietly revolutionized how luxury brands connected with consumers. Her client list read like a who's who of international corporations, and her personal net worth had eclipsed 8 figures 6 months ago. But more than that, she'd built something Daniel's billions couldn't buy. A life filled with purpose, genuine relationships, and the fierce joy that came from raising 2 extraordinary children who carried his DNA but her values. Elena had known this invitation would come eventually. Daniel's ego wouldn't let their story end with her simply disappearing into a successful life without him. He needed to prove his superiority, needed to grind her face in what he believed was her failure. He had no idea he was about to meet his son and daughter for the first time. The twins knew their father's name, had seen pictures, understood in the age-appropriate way that children do that their daddy lived far away and made different choices than mama did. But they'd never asked to meet him, content in the abundant love Elena and her tight-knit circle provided. Now, as she watched Lucas carefully practice his handshake and Sophia twirl in her party dress, Elena felt the familiar surge of protective, fierce love that had carried her through pregnancy alone, through sleepless nights and teething and first steps that Daniel had missed. "Are you excited to meet Daddy?" she asked gently, crouching down to their eye level. "Will he like us?" Sophia asked, her small hand finding Elena's with the intuitive wisdom children possessed. "Oh, baby girl," Elena whispered, pulling both children close. "He's going to love you so much it'll probably scare him. But that's not your job to worry about, okay? Your job is just to be your wonderful selves." What she didn't tell them was that their father was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. That real power wasn't about who could humiliate whom, but about who had the courage to love completely and the wisdom to protect what mattered most. Saturday night couldn't come fast enough. The memory hit Daniel like a physical blow as he stood in his corner office, Manhattan sprawling beneath him like a conquered kingdom. 5 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago, Elena had stood in this exact spot, her face pale with something that looked like grief. "You can't be serious," he'd said then, his voice carrying the same arrogant disbelief that had just colored his phone call with her. "You're choosing them over me? Over us?" Elena had been 26 then, her dark hair longer, her artist's hands paint-stained and trembling as she held the letter from the Environmental Protection Group. The letter that detailed how Cross Industries' latest development project would destroy the wetlands where her grandmother had taught her to paint, where 3 generations of her family had found peace. "It's not about choosing sides, Daniel. It's about choosing what's right." "Right." Daniel had laughed, the sound as cutting as broken glass. "Right is building something that matters. Right is creating jobs, stimulating the economy, making a difference in the real world. Not playing with watercolors in some swamp." The words had landed like physical blows, and he'd seen something die in her eyes. Not love, but the hope that love might be enough to bridge the chasm between their values. "If that's what you really think of me," she'd whispered, "then we never really knew each other at all." She'd walked out that day, and Daniel had let her go, certain she'd come crawling back when reality hit. When her art couldn't pay rent, when she realized what she'd given up for her principles. She never did. Now, as Margaret nervously arranged files on his desk, Daniel found himself wondering for the first time what Elena's life had actually looked like these past 5 years. The woman on the phone hadn't sounded broken or desperate. She'd sounded amused, confident, like she knew something he didn't. "Sir?" Margaret's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "The Patterson merger documents need your signature." Daniel barely glanced at the papers that would consolidate his hold on the East Coast development market. His mind was stuck on those children's voices he'd heard in the background of Elena's call. Happy, carefree laughter that spoke of a home filled with joy. "Margaret," he said slowly, "I want you to run a background check on Elena Rivers. Full financial report, employment history, everything." "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, why are we?" "Just do it." The words came out harsher than intended, and Margaret flinched. Daniel softened his tone with visible effort. "Please. I need to know what I'm walking into." What he was walking into, 300 miles away, was Elena's carefully orchestrated morning routine with Lucas and Sophia. Unlike Daniel's sterile penthouse apartment, with its minimalist decor and silence that money couldn't fill, Elena's townhouse hummed with life. "Mama, Lucas is putting syrup in my orange juice again." Sophia's indignant voice carried from the kitchen, followed by her brother's mischievous giggling. "Lucas Christopher Rivers," Elena called, not bothering to look up from her laptop where she was finalizing the marketing strategy that would launch her latest client's campaign. "What have we discussed about bodily autonomy and other people's breakfast choices? That I can't make choices for Sophia's body, Even if I think syrup in orange juice would taste amazing, Lucas recited dutifully, though his tone suggested he still believed he was right about the syrup. Elena smiled, remembering how Daniel used to add completely inappropriate ingredients to his coffee. Hot sauce, maple syrup, once memorably ranch dressing, convinced that conventional combinations were for conventional people. Lucas had inherited his father's experimental nature, though thankfully Elena had managed to channel it toward more constructive outlets. That's right. Now apologize to your sister and help her make fresh orange juice. Sorry, sophomore. But when you're ready to live dangerously, I've got ideas. Sophia's giggle was pure music. I'm 5, Lucas. I'm not ready for syrup juice yet. Yet, Lucas agreed solemnly. But I'll be here when you are. The exchange was so perfectly them. Lucas the protective instigator, Sophia the cautious but curious follower, that Elena felt the familiar tug of love so fierce it was almost painful. They were extraordinary children, brilliant and kind and funny, and Daniel had missed every moment of their becoming. His choice. His loss. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her business partner and closest friend, Marcus Chin. Board meeting moved to 10 a.m. Also, my sources say Cross Industries has been asking questions about you. Want me to dig into why? Elena stared at the message, pieces clicking into place with uncomfortable clarity. Daniel's invitation hadn't been spontaneous cruelty. It had been calculated. He'd been watching her, checking up on her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike when he thought she'd be most vulnerable. He had no idea that Marcus Chin, her business partner, was also the former head of digital strategy at Cross Industries, the man Daniel had unceremoniously fired 3 years ago for lacking vision. Marcus's vision had been questioning the environmental impact of their expansion plans, and his firing had made industry headlines. Marcus knew exactly how Daniel Cross operated, and he'd been protecting Elena from Daniel's world while helping her build something better. Mama? Sophia appeared at Elena's elbow, orange juice, thankfully syrup-free, in hand. You look worried. Are you thinking about Daddy? Elena's heart clenched. Sophia had an unsettling ability to read emotions, to understand currents that most adults missed. A little bit, sweetheart. Are you nervous about meeting him? No, Sophia said matter-of-factly. Lucas is nervous, though. He's been practicing handshakes all morning. I'm not nervous. Lucas protested from the doorway, though his hair stuck up in the cowlick pattern that always appeared when he was anxious. I'm just prepared. Uncle Marcus says preparation is the key to confidence. Uncle Marcus is very wise, Elena agreed, though her chest tightened at the mention of Marcus. Daniel would recognize him immediately at the gala, would understand that Elena hadn't just survived. She'd allied herself with his former enemy and thrived. The betrayal Daniel was about to feel would be nothing compared to what Elena had experienced 5 years ago when she'd realized the man she loved saw her passion as a hobby, her values as obstacles to be overcome. But unlike Daniel, Elena had learned to channel her pain into power. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID made her blood run cold. Cross Industries Legal Department. Elena Rivers speaking. Ms. Rivers, this is James Hartwell from Cross Industries Legal. I'm calling to inform you that you may have received an unauthorized communication from our CEO. Mr. Cross has asked me to clarify that any invitation you may have received was sent in error and should be disregarded. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. So Daniel was trying to take it back, trying to maintain control by making the invitation disappear. Too late. Mr. Hartwell, she said sweetly, please inform Mr. Cross that I've already cleared my schedule for Saturday evening. I'm quite looking forward to catching up with old friends. Ms. Rivers, I really must insist. And Mr. Hartwell? Tell Daniel that I'll be bringing guests. I'm sure he'll be delighted to meet them. She ended the call before he could respond, her hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. Lucas and Sophia looked at her with identical expressions of concern, Daniel's intelligent eyes in their young faces. Mama, Lucas said carefully, are you sure Daddy wants to meet us? Because if he doesn't, that's okay. We have Uncle Marcus and Aunt Sarah and Grammy Elena and... Stop. Elena pulled both children into her arms, breathing in their sweet, familiar scent. Your father is going to want to meet you so much it'll probably overwhelm him. But baby, even if he didn't, even if every adult in the world was too foolish to see how amazing you are, you would still be perfect and loved and worthy. Do you understand me? We understand, Sophia whispered. But Mama, if Daddy tries to hurt your feelings like he did before, Lucas and I will protect you. The fierce protectiveness in her 5-year-old daughter's voice broke Elena's heart and mended it simultaneously. Daniel had no idea what he was about to face. Not just the woman he'd underestimated, but the children who'd inherited his intelligence and stubborn determination, shaped by Elena's unwavering love and moral courage. Saturday night would change everything. But first, Elena had a phone call to make. Marcus needed to know that their carefully built life was about to intersect with Daniel Cross's world, and they needed to be prepared for the explosion that would follow. As she watched her children return to their breakfast, their easy chatter filling the warm kitchen, Elena felt the last piece of uncertainty fade away. She wasn't the heartbroken young woman who'd walked out of Daniel's office 5 years ago. She was a mother, a successful businesswoman, a woman who'd learned that real power came not from crushing others, but from building something beautiful from the ashes of what you'd lost. Daniel Cross was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The background report landed on Daniel's desk at 11:47 a.m. with the weight of a nuclear bomb disguised as ordinary paperwork. Margaret set it down with unusual gentleness, as if she understood that the information inside would detonate something in Daniel's carefully controlled world. "Sir," she said softly, "you're going to want to sit down for this." Daniel's hands shook as he opened the folder, though he couldn't have explained why. The first page was routine. Elena Rivers, age 31, no criminal record, excellent credit score. But as he turned the pages, his world began to tilt off its axis. Rivers and Associates Marketing, founded 2022. Annual revenue, $47 million. Client list includes Meridian Luxury Hotels, Ashford Automotive, Chin Digital Solutions. Daniel's breath caught. Chin Digital Solutions, Marcus Chen's company. The man Daniel had destroyed 3 years ago for daring to question Cross Industries' environmental practices was not only back in business, he was Elena's business partner. Personal assets. Townhouse in Riverside Heights, valued at $2.8 million. Investment portfolio worth approximately $12 million. College funds established for 2 dependents. 2 dependents. Daniel's vision blurred as he stared at the words. Below them, in Margaret's precise handwriting, were the details that made his blood turn to ice water. Lucas Christopher Rivers, D.O.B., March 15, 2019. Sophia Grace Rivers, D.O.B., March 15, 2019. Twins. Born exactly 9 months after Elena had walked out of his office. Born with his eyes, according to the school photos Margaret had somehow obtained. Born with Elena's smile and his stubborn cowlick and a birth certificate that listed father, unknown. Daniel's phone clattered to the floor as the implications crashed over him like an avalanche. He was a father, had been a father for 5 years without knowing it. Elena had been pregnant when she left, had carried his children and raised them alone while he built his empire on the very land she'd begged him to preserve. "Sir?" Margaret's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Should I cancel your meetings for the day?" Daniel couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The children's laughter he'd heard on the phone suddenly made devastating sense. Elena hadn't just moved on, she'd built a family. His family. Without him. The cruelty of his invitation hit him like a physical blow. He'd planned to humiliate the mother of his children, to parade his wealth in front of the woman who was raising his son and daughter with values he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. "The gala," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I have to cancel the gala." "Sir, it's too late for that. The invitations went out 2 weeks ago. The venue is booked," the catering ordered. "Half the city's elite are already planning to attend." Margaret's practical tone cut through his panic. "And sir? Ms. Rivers already RSVP'd. For 3. For 3. Elena and his children. Children who didn't even know him, who'd grown up without him, who'd learned to tie their shoes and ride bikes and read bedtime stories while he'd been acquiring companies and building monuments to his own ego. Daniel's chest felt like it was caving in. In 6 hours, he would come face to face with the family he'd unknowingly abandoned, in front of everyone who mattered in his professional world. The irony was crushing. He'd planned the gala to showcase his success, and instead it would become the stage for the most devastating failure of his life. 300 miles away, Elena stood before her bedroom mirror, fastening the clasp of her grandmother's pearl necklace with hands that trembled slightly despite her resolve. The woman reflected back at her was a far cry from the uncertain artist who'd left Daniel's office 5 years ago. Tonight, she wore midnight blue silk that skimmed her curves with sophisticated elegance, her dark hair swept into a chignon that revealed the delicate line of her neck. She looked successful, confident, beautiful. Everything Daniel had assumed she could never become without him. But beneath the polished exterior, her heart hammered with the knowledge that tonight would change everything for her children. "Mama, you look like a princess." Sophia breathed from the doorway, resplendent in her sparkly blue dress with Lucas beside her in his first real suit. "You all look perfect," Elena said, crouching down to adjust Lucas's tie with gentle hands. "Remember what we talked about? Be polite, be ourselves, and let the grown-ups handle any complicated feelings," Lucas recited solemnly. "Mama, what if Daddy doesn't like us?" The question Elena had been dreading finally came, delivered with the devastating directness only children possessed. She took both small hands in hers, looking into eyes that were heartbreakingly familiar. "Then that would be his loss, not yours." "But Lucas, sweetheart, your daddy is going to love you so much he won't know what to do with himself." Sometimes adults make mistakes when they're overwhelmed by big feelings. "Like when I cried when Sophia was born because I thought you wouldn't love me anymore?" Lucas asked. "Exactly like that. But you learned that love doesn't get smaller when it gets shared. It gets bigger. Your daddy is going to learn that tonight." What Elena didn't tell them was that she'd spent 5 years preparing for this moment, building a life so solid and beautiful that even Daniel's wealth couldn't overshadow it. She'd succeeded beyond her wildest dreams not to spite him, but to prove to herself that choosing love and principles over convenience had been the right decision. Marcus appeared in the hallway, immaculate in his tuxedo, his expression gentle as he took in the three of them. "Ready to change someone's world? Are we being mean to Daddy?" Sophia asked with the moral clarity that sometimes startled Elena. "No, sweetheart," Marcus said, crouching to her level. "We're giving him a chance to be the daddy you deserve. Sometimes grown-ups need help remembering what's really important." Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Daniel's legal team, the third attempt to get her to skip the gala. She deleted it without reading, just as she'd deleted the previous 2. There would be no backing down now, no last-minute escapes for either of them. "Uncle Marcus," Lucas said thoughtfully, "why didn't Daddy want to meet us before?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Elena over the children's heads. "He didn't know you existed, buddy. And that's going to make tonight very special, and probably very overwhelming for him." "But we knew about him," Sophia pointed out with 5-year-old logic. "Mama showed us pictures and told us stories. Why didn't he ask about us?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Elena had wondered the same thing for 5 years. Whether Daniel had ever suspected, ever wondered if their last night together had created more than just heartbreak. "Sometimes," Elena said carefully, "people get so focused on being right that they forget to ask the right questions. But tonight, your daddy is going to get answers to questions he didn't even know he should be asking." Back in Manhattan, Daniel sat in his empty penthouse, staring at a photo Margaret had included in the file. Elena at some charity function, radiant with success, flanked by 2 children who looked like smaller versions of himself. Lucas had his serious expression, the one Daniel wore during board meetings. Sophia had his smile, wide and genuine and completely unguarded. They were beautiful. Perfect. His. And he'd missed 5 years of their lives because he'd been too proud to reach out, too certain Elena would come crawling back, too focused on proving his superiority to wonder if she might be building something better without him. His phone rang. Marcus Chen's name on the caller ID made Daniel's stomach clench with something beyond dread. "Cross." His voice came out steady despite the chaos in his chest. "Daniel." Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "I thought you should know. Elena didn't want to blindside you completely. The children know they're meeting their father tonight. They're excited." "Marcus, Daniel's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know about them." "I know." The simple response carried no judgment, only truth. "Elena never told you because she knew you'd feel obligated to help financially, and she didn't want your money. She wanted your love, your respect, your partnership. When you made it clear those weren't available, she chose to build a different kind of family. They don't even have my name." The words came out broken. "They have something better. They have a mother who's shown them every day what it means to choose love over convenience, principles over profit. They have a community that adores them. They have security and joy and the knowledge that they're valued for who they are, not what they might achieve." Each word was a knife between Daniel's ribs. "What do I do, Marcus? How do I face them?" "You show up. You be honest. You let them see who you really are underneath all that armor you've built." Marcus paused. "And Daniel, you remember that tonight isn't about you proving anything. It's about two incredible kids finally meeting their father. Don't make them pay for your mistakes. The line went dead, leaving Daniel alone with the weight of 5 years of missed bedtime stories, lost first words, absent birthdays. In 4 hours, he would face the family he'd unknowingly destroyed when he'd chosen his empire over Elena's heart. There was no backing out now. No legal maneuver that could undo the devastation of his own making. Tonight, Daniel Cross would learn whether wealth could buy redemption, or if some things were too precious to be purchased. The gala would go on. The confrontation would happen. And somewhere in the wreckage of his carefully constructed world, Daniel would have to find the man Elena had once loved. The man who might be worthy of being Lucas and Sophia's father. If that man still existed at all. The Grand Metropolitan buzzed with New York's elite as Daniel arrived, his hands still trembling from the third scotch he'd downed in his penthouse. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over faces he'd known for years. Business partners, rivals, society figures who moved through his world like sharks in expensive suits. None of them knew that in less than an hour, his carefully constructed image would detonate in front of everyone who mattered. Daniel! Victoria Ashford swept toward him, her champagne glass already half empty, her smile sharp with gossip-hungry anticipation. I heard the most interesting rumor about tonight's guest list. Someone said Elena Rivers would be here. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Victoria had been Elena's roommate in college, before money and ambition had pulled them in different directions. She'd also been the one to gleefully inform Daniel, 2 years ago, that Elena was playing house somewhere upstate, probably broke and bitter. Victoria. Daniel's voice came out rougher than intended. I wasn't aware you kept track of Elena's whereabouts. Oh, darling, I keep track of everyone's whereabouts. It's how I stay relevant. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. Though I must say, I'm surprised you invited her. Didn't she leave you for some environmental nonsense? How deliciously awkward this will be. Before Daniel could respond, a commotion near the entrance made every head turn. The massive double doors opened, and Elena stepped into the ballroom like a queen returning to reclaim her throne. She was devastating. The midnight blue silk moved with her like liquid starlight, and her grandmother's pearls caught the light as she surveyed the room with calm confidence. But it wasn't Elena who made the crowd fall silent. It was the 2 children beside her, their small hands clasped in hers, their identical dark eyes taking in the opulent ballroom with intelligent curiosity. My God, Victoria breathed, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Are those? Daniel couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Lucas wore a miniature tuxedo that made him look like a younger version of Daniel himself, while Sophia's blue dress sparkled as she whispered something that made Elena smile. They were perfect, confident, poised, beautiful children who carried themselves with the quiet dignity Elena had always possessed. His children. His family. Standing 30 feet away like a vision he'd never dared to dream. Uncle Marcus. Sophia's delighted voice carried across the suddenly quiet ballroom as Marcus Chun appeared beside them, resplendent in his tuxedo, his hand coming to rest protectively on Elena's lower back. The gesture was subtle, intimate, and it hit Daniel like a physical blow. Marcus, his former employee, the man he'd destroyed for questioning his methods, was clearly more than just Elena's business partner. The way he guided her through the crowd, the easy familiarity between them, the way the children gravitated toward him with obvious affection. Marcus was the father figure Daniel had never been. Breathe, Victoria murmured beside him, though her voice carried vicious amusement. You look like you've seen a ghost. Or several. Daniel forced air into his lungs as Elena's gaze found his across the crowded room. For a moment, time suspended itself. 5 years collapsed into nothing, and he was looking into the eyes of the woman he'd loved and lost, the woman who'd carried his children and built a life without him. Elena smiled, not bitter or triumphant, but with the serene confidence of someone who'd made peace with her choices. Then she began walking toward him, Lucas and Sophia flanking her like small guards, Marcus a steady presence at her side. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, conversations dying as New York's elite realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Daniel Cross, the man who controlled everything in his orbit, was about to face the consequences of the one thing he couldn't control. Daniel, Elena said softly as she stopped 3 feet away. Her voice carried none of the anger he'd expected, none of the bitterness he probably deserved. Thank you for inviting us. Elena. Her name came out like a prayer, like a curse, like everything he'd been too proud to say for 5 years. You look different, she finished with gentle amusement. 5 years will do that. She glanced down at the children, who were studying Daniel with the intense focus only small children possessed. Lucas, Sophia, this is Daniel Cross. Daniel, these are my children. Not our children. My children. The distinction was surgical in its precision, and Daniel felt it cut deep. Hello, Mr. Cross, Lucas said formally, extending his small hand with the serious dignity of a tiny ambassador. Mama says you used to be friends. Daniel knelt to Lucas's eye level, his hand trembling as he shook his son's smaller one. The resemblance was startling up close. Lucas had his determined chin, his intense gaze, the same stubborn set to his shoulders that Daniel wore when he was thinking through a complex problem. We were very good friends, Daniel managed, his voice thick with emotions he couldn't name. You look like a very smart young man. I am smart, Lucas agreed matter-of-factly. Mama says I get it from both sides. And I like to experiment with food combinations, which Uncle Marcus says shows scientific curiosity. Uncle Marcus. The title was another knife between Daniel's ribs. My turn. Sophia stepped forward with 5-year-old impatience, her smile radiant and completely trusting. I'm Sophia Grace, and I can already read chapter books, and I'm learning piano, and I want to be a marine biologist when I grow up because someone needs to protect the ocean. The words hit Daniel like a sledgehammer. Protect the ocean. Environmental protection. The very values Elena had tried to share with him 5 years ago, now living bright and passionate in his daughter's voice. That's a wonderful goal, he said softly, accepting Sophia's enthusiastic handshake. The ocean definitely needs protecting. Mama says you build things, Sophia continued with the relentless curiosity of a child. Do you ever build things that help the ocean? The question was innocent, devastating, impossible to answer honestly without admitting that his empire was built on exactly the kind of development that destroyed the environments Sophia wanted to protect. I build different kinds of things, Daniel said finally. Oh, Sophia's face fell slightly. Well, maybe you could try building helpful things sometime. Mama says it's never too late to make better choices. The words, delivered with 5-year-old sincerity, landed like a bomb in Daniel's chest. Around them, the crowd watched with rapt attention, though pretending to focus on their conversations and champagne. Sophia, Elena said gently, why don't you and Lucas go with Uncle Marcus to see the dessert table? I need to talk to Mr. Cross for a moment. Are you going to tell him about our surprise? Lucas asked with the kind of stage whisper that carried across half the ballroom. What surprise? Daniel's voice cracked on the words. Elena's smile held secrets that made his chest tighten with something beyond fear. Later, sweetheart. Go with Uncle Marcus. As Marcus led the children away, his hand briefly touching Elena's shoulder in a gesture of support and intimacy that made Daniel's jaw clench, Elena turned back to Daniel with an expression he couldn't read. They're extraordinary, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, they are. Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, neither seeking his approval nor dismissing his opinion. They're kind, brilliant, curious, compassionate children who've never wanted for anything that mattered. Elena, I didn't know. You have to believe me. I didn't know you were pregnant when you left. I know. The simple acknowledgement carried no forgiveness, no condemnation, just truth. I found out 2 weeks after I walked out of your office. By then, it was clear we wanted fundamentally different things from life. Different things. Daniel's voice rose slightly, drawing curious glances from nearby guests. Elena, I wanted you. I wanted us. No, Elena said softly, her dark eyes holding his with unwavering certainty. You wanted me to become someone else. Someone who valued the same things you did, who would smile and nod while you destroyed the places and principles I loved. You wanted a version of me that never existed. The words were delivered without malice, but they landed like physical blows. Around them, conversations had stopped entirely. Victoria Ashford watched with predatory fascination, her phone undoubtedly capturing every moment for tomorrow's society pages. I could have changed, Daniel said desperately. If I'd known about them, I could have. Could have what? Paid child support while continuing to build your empire on environmental destruction? Visited them on weekends while funding the very projects they'd grow up to oppose. Elena's voice remained gentle, but steel ran beneath it. Daniel, you can't love someone and simultaneously destroy everything they believe in. I learned that the hard way. I loved you, Daniel said, the words torn from somewhere deep in his chest. You loved the idea of me, Elena corrected. You loved having a beautiful, talented woman who made you feel cultured and enlightened. But you never loved the actual me. The woman who would choose a wetland over a shopping center, who would sacrifice financial security for moral certainty. The truth of it hit Daniel like an avalanche. She was right. He'd loved Elena's beauty, her talent, her passion, as long as it didn't interfere with his ambitions. The moment her values had conflicted with his goals, he'd expected her to bend. "So you chose Marcus instead," Daniel said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. Elena's smile was sad, knowing. "I didn't choose Marcus instead of you, Daniel. I chose a life where I could be myself completely, where I could raise children to value kindness over conquest, where I could build something meaningful instead of just profitable. And Marcus just happened to fit into that life perfectly? Marcus understands that love means supporting someone's dreams, not trying to reshape them into something more convenient." Elena's voice softened. "He's been a wonderful partner and an incredible father figure to Lucas and Sophia. They adore him." The words were meant to be informative, not cruel, but they destroyed Daniel more thoroughly than any deliberate attack could have. Marcus Chun, the man Daniel had fired, had attempted to ruin, had stepped into the family Daniel had unknowingly abandoned and become everything Daniel had failed to be. "Elena!" Victoria Ashford materialized beside them with predatory timing, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "How wonderful to see you again. And such beautiful children. Though I have to ask, who's the father? They look so familiar, but I just can't place." The question hung in the air like a blade, and Daniel realized with horrifying clarity that Victoria knew exactly who the children's father was. She was fishing for a public confirmation, a scandal that would feed the gossip mills for months. Elena's expression didn't change, but Daniel saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation, decision. The moment she chose her next move in a game, he was only beginning to understand. "Actually, Victoria," Elena said with a smile that could have frozen champagne, "that's tonight's surprise. Children, come here please." Lucas and Sophia appeared at her side with the speed that suggested they'd been watching the adult conversation carefully. Marcus followed, his expression unreadable but alert. "Everyone," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. "I'd like you to meet Lucas and Sophia Cross, Daniel's children." The words detonated like a bomb in the elegant space. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Victoria's phone clattered to the marble floor. Daniel's world tilted on its axis as he realized Elena had just publicly claimed him as the father of her children, not to hurt him, but to protect them from speculation and gossip. She'd given Lucas and Sophia his name in front of everyone who mattered in his world. The children beamed at the introduction, completely unaware of the social earthquake they'd just caused. Lucas stepped forward with his serious dignity intact. "Hello, everyone," he said politely. "We're very excited to finally meet our daddy's friends." And in that moment, Daniel understood that Elena hadn't brought his children here to humiliate him. She'd brought them here to give him the choice he'd never known he needed to make, between the empire he'd built and the family he'd unknowingly lost. The choice that would define the rest of his life. The silence that followed Elena's announcement stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Daniel's chest felt hollow as he watched his children, smile politely at the crowd of stunned faces. They seemed genuinely happy to be introduced as his family, completely unaware that they'd just detonated a social nuclear bomb. "Well," Victoria finally managed, her voice pitched high with shock and vicious delight, "this is quite the revelation. Daniel Cross, a secret father. How unexpected." Daniel barely heard her. His attention was fixed on Elena, searching her face for some sign of the woman he'd once known beneath this poised stranger who'd just claimed him publicly as the father of her children. But Elena's expression remained serene, unreadable, as if she'd planned every word of this moment. Which, Daniel was beginning to realize she probably had. "Elena," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Privately." "Of course." Elena's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes, calculation, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Marcus, would you mind entertaining the children for a few more minutes?" "Not at all." Marcus's response was smooth, but Daniel caught the look that passed between him and Elena. Intimate, coordinated, like two people executing a carefully rehearsed plan. Elena led Daniel through the crowd toward a quieter alcove, their passage tracked by every eye in the ballroom. The whispers started before they'd taken 3 steps. 5 years, Daniel said the moment they were out of immediate earshot. 5 years, Elena. You let me believe. Let you believe what? Elena interrupted, her voice still maddeningly calm. That I'd disappeared? That I'd failed? That I was somewhere pining for the life I'd walked away from. You let me believe I didn't have children. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, drawing glances from nearby guests. Lower your voice, Elena said softly, but there was steel beneath the silk. You're making a scene in front of your colleagues. The warning hit him like cold water. This was exactly what she'd wanted, to destabilize him in front of everyone who mattered in his professional world. To strip away his control and force him to react emotionally while his reputation crumbled in real time. This is all calculated, Daniel realized, his voice barely above a whisper. Tonight, the invitation, bringing them here. You planned all of this. Elena's smile was answer enough. Did you ever intend to tell me about them? Daniel's chest felt like it was caving in. Or was this always the plan? Wait until you could cause maximum damage. Maximum damage? Elena's laugh was soft, musical, and utterly without warmth. Daniel, if I wanted to cause maximum damage, I would have filed for child support 3 years ago and let the media find out during the court proceedings. I would have leaked the story to the business journals when you were negotiating the Patterson merger. I would have. Then why? Daniel's voice cracked. Why now? Why like this? Elena studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 5 years of carefully controlled anger. Because I wanted you to see what you chose when you let me walk away. I wanted you to meet the children who've grown up without their father because he was too proud to wonder if there might be consequences to his actions. I wanted you to understand, in front of everyone who enables your empire, exactly what your choices have cost. Each word was a surgical strike, precise and devastating. Around them, the gala continued, but Daniel felt like he was drowning in plain sight. You want revenge, he said flatly. I want justice, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Justice. Daniel's voice rose despite his efforts to control it. For what? For building a successful company? For making something of myself? For building that company on the destruction of everything I asked you to protect? For dismissing my values as environmental nonsense? For firing Marcus because he dared to question your methods? Elena's composure finally cracked, revealing the fire that had been burning beneath her calm exterior. For making me choose between loving you and being myself. The accusation hung between them like a blade. Daniel opened his mouth to defend himself, but Elena wasn't finished. Do you know what Lucas asked me last week? She continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow cut deeper than shouting. He asked why his daddy didn't want to meet him. And I had to explain that some people are so focused on being important that they forget what actually matters. That's not fair, Daniel said desperately. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Elena's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the pain she'd been carrying for 5 years. You didn't call, didn't check, didn't wonder if maybe, just maybe, something had happened that night before I left. You were so certain I'd come crawling back that you never considered I might have something worth staying away for. The truth of it hit Daniel like a physical blow. She was right. He'd been so focused on his wounded pride, so certain of his own importance, that he'd never once considered that Elena might have moved on completely. That she might have built something better without him. Elena, Mr. Cross. A small voice interrupted their heated whisper argument. Lucas appeared at Daniel's elbow, his young face creased with concern. Are you and Mama fighting? Because if you are, maybe you should take a break and have some cake. Uncle Marcus says cake makes everything better. The innocent suggestion, delivered with 5-year-old wisdom, shattered something in Daniel's chest. This beautiful, thoughtful child, his son, was trying to mediate between his parents like he'd done it before. Like he was used to managing adult emotions. We're not fighting, sweetheart, Elena said gently, her entire demeanor shifting as she knelt to Lucas's level. We're just talking about some grown-up things. Are you having fun? Yeah, but Sophia wants to dance, and Uncle Marcus says he's too tall to be a good dancing partner for someone her size. Lucas looked up at Daniel with hopeful expectation. Do you know how to dance with little kids? The request was so normal, so innocently trusting, that Daniel felt his throat close up. I'm not sure I remember how. It's easy, Lucas assured him. You just hold her hands and let her stand on your feet. She's not very heavy. Through the crowd, Daniel could see Sophia standing near the dance floor, her sparkly dress catching the light as she swayed hopefully to the orchestra's gentle waltz. Marcus stood beside her, clearly willing but obviously conscious of the height difference that would make dancing awkward. "Go ahead," Elena said softly, though her eyes still held the sharp edge of their confrontation. She's been looking forward to this all week. Daniel looked between Elena and his daughter, understanding that this was another test, another moment designed to show him what he'd missed. But as he walked toward Sophia, her face lighting up with pure joy at his approach, he realized it didn't matter if it was a test. His daughter wanted to dance with him. "Would you like to dance?" he asked formally, offering his hand with the same courtesy he'd show a business partner. Sophia giggled, a sound like silver bells. "You're supposed to bow," she informed him seriously. "Uncle Marcus taught me proper dancing etiquette." Daniel's chest tightened at the mention of Marcus, the man who'd been there for all the firsts Daniel had missed. But he bowed gravely, and Sophia curtsied in return with 5-year-old solemnity. "Now hold my hands and I'll step on your feet," Sophia instructed as they moved onto the dance floor. "I think you mean you'll step on my feet," Daniel corrected gently. "No, silly," Sophia giggled again. "I stand on your feet and you do the dancing. That way I'm tall enough." As they moved together, Sophia's small feet balanced on his dress shoes. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. She was so light, so trusting, chattering away about her dance lessons and her favorite songs while he tried not to think about all the father-daughter dances he'd already missed. "This is nice," Sophia said contentedly as they swayed to the music. "I always wondered what it would be like to dance with my daddy." The words hit Daniel like a sledgehammer. You thought about that?" "All the time," Sophia admitted with 5-year-old honesty. "Especially when other kids talked about their daddies. But Mama said you were busy building important things, and Uncle Marcus said sometimes people need time to figure out what's really important." Each innocent word was a knife between his ribs. Daniel looked over Sophia's head to where Elena stood watching them, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Marcus had an arm around Lucas, both of them smiling at the dancing pair. They looked like a family, a complete, happy family that had no need for Daniel's presence. "Daddy." Sophia's voice drew his attention back to her upturned face. "Are you sad?" "You look sad." "A little," Daniel admitted, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't hide from this perceptive child. "Why?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Daniel found himself telling the truth. "Because I miss so much. Because I should have been here to dance with you before now." Sophia considered this with the seriousness that seemed to be her default mode. "Well, you're here now," she said finally. "And we're dancing now. So maybe instead of being sad about the before times, you could be happy about the right now times." The wisdom in her simple words staggered him. This 5-year-old child, his daughter, was offering him grace he hadn't earned and forgiveness he didn't deserve. "You're very smart," he said softly. "I get it from both sides," Sophia repeated Lucas's earlier words with obvious pride. "Mama says the best parts of people get passed down to their kids, even when the people don't live together." As the song ended, Sophia stood on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek with casual affection that broke his heart. "Thank you for dancing with me, Daddy. Now you should dance with Mama." "I don't think Mama wants to dance with me," Daniel said honestly. "She does," Sophia said with the certainty only children possessed. "She's just scared you'll make her sad again. But you won't, right? Because now you know what's really important." Before Daniel could answer, Marcus appeared beside them, his expression carefully neutral. "Mind if I cut in?" Elena's looking a little overwhelmed. Daniel followed Marcus's gaze to where Elena stood alone, her composure finally cracking as she watched her daughter with the father she'd kept at bay for 5 years. She looked vulnerable in a way that reminded Daniel of the woman he'd fallen in love with, before pride and principles had torn them apart. "She planned this," Daniel said quietly as Sophia skipped away to find Lucas. "All of it. Tonight, the confrontation, bringing the children. It was all calculated to destroy me publicly." "Yes," Marcus agreed without hesitation. "It was." The confirmation hit Daniel like a physical blow. "You helped her. Every step of the way." Marcus's voice held no apology, no shame. "Elena deserved to have her moment, Daniel. She deserved to see you face the consequences of your choices. And you? What did you get out of it? Revenge for your termination?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't entirely pleasant. "I got the woman I love and 2 incredible children who call me family. I got to build something meaningful while you built monuments to your own ego. As for revenge..." He paused, pulling out his phone to show Daniel a notification. "Elena and I just acquired controlling interest in Patterson Holdings. Your merger is dead." The words hit Daniel like an avalanche. The Patterson merger, the deal that would cement his dominance of the East Coast development market, had been 3 years in the making. Without it, Cross Industries would be vulnerable to hostile takeover. "You destroyed my company," Daniel whispered. "No," Marcus corrected. "We gave it better leadership. Elena's been quietly buying up shares through shell companies for 2 years. By Monday morning, Cross Industries will be focused on sustainable development and environmental restoration. The kind of work Elena always believed in." Daniel's legs felt weak. In one night, Elena had taken his children, his reputation, and his empire. She'd played a game he didn't even know they were playing, and she'd won completely. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel asked, his voice barely audible. Marcus studied him for a long moment before answering. "Because Elena still loves you, you idiot. This whole elaborate revenge fantasy? It was never about destroying you. It was about forcing you to see what really matters before it was too late to change." The words recontextualized everything. Elena's careful planning, the public revelation, even bringing the children tonight. She hadn't wanted to destroy him. She'd wanted to save him from himself. But as Daniel looked across the ballroom at Elena, now fielding congratulations from guests who'd quickly adapted to the evening's revelations, he realized it might be too late. She'd won their war, claimed their children, and built a life that didn't need him. He'd lost everything that mattered, and the worst part was, he finally understood why. Daniel stood frozen in the center of his own gala as the full scope of Elena's victory crystallized around him. Conversations buzzed with speculation about the evening's revelations. Society photographers discreetly captured his stunned expression, and through it all, his children laughed with genuine joy as they explored the ballroom that had become the stage for his complete destruction. "I need air," he managed, pushing past Marcus toward the terrace doors. "Daniel, wait," Marcus called, but Daniel was already stepping into the cool October night, his chest heaving as if he'd been drowning. The city sprawled below him, a kingdom of lights he'd spent 15 years conquering. Tomorrow, none of it would matter. Elena had systematically dismantled everything he'd built, and she'd done it so elegantly that most of the guests inside were probably applauding her business acumen. His phone buzzed with calls from board members who'd already heard the news. The Patterson merger collapse would trigger a cascade of failed deals, broken partnerships, and probably his own ouster as CEO. Elena hadn't just taken his company. She'd orchestrated his professional assassination with surgical precision. "Daddy!" Sophia's voice made him turn. She stood in the doorway, her sparkly dress catching the terrace lights, her young face creased with concern. "Uncle Marcus said you needed some air. Are you okay?" The question was so innocent, so trusting, that Daniel felt something break inside his chest. This beautiful child, his daughter, was worried about him even as her mother systematically destroyed his life. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he lied, kneeling to her level. "Just needed a quiet moment." "Mama does that sometimes too," Sophia said wisely. "When she's thinking really hard about important stuff." "Are you thinking about important stuff?" "Very important stuff," Daniel confirmed, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't hide. Sophia studied his face with the unsettling perception children sometimes possessed. "Are you thinking about how to be a good daddy? Because if you are, I can help. I've been thinking about it for a really long time." The offer shattered what remained of Daniel's composure. His 5-year-old daughter was trying to teach him how to be her father, as if she'd spent years preparing for this moment. "What would you tell me?" he asked softly. "Well," Sophia said seriously, settling beside him on the terrace bench like they were old friends. "Good daddies listen when kids have something important to say. And they don't work so much that they forget about bedtime stories. And they protect things that matter, not just things that make money." Each word was a knife between his ribs. Elena had raised their daughter to understand exactly what kind of man he was, and what kind of man he should have been. "And good daddies don't make mamas cry," Sophia continued with devastating innocence. "Mama cries sometimes when she thinks Lucas and I can't see. Usually when she looks at pictures of you from the before times." "Your mama still has pictures of me?" Daniel's voice came out strangled. "In her bedroom drawer. She thinks they're secret, but I saw them when I was looking for Band-Aids." Sophia leaned against his arm with casual affection. "She keeps them with our baby pictures and the letters Daddy, I mean you, wrote her before we were born." Daniel's world tilted. "What letters?" "The love letters. Mama reads them sometimes when she's really sad. Lucas says they make her happy and sad at the same time, which sounds confusing, but Mama says grown-up feelings are complicated." The implications hit Daniel like an avalanche. Elena had kept his letters, the passionate, idealistic declarations of love he'd written when he was still young enough to believe they could change the world together. She'd kept them through pregnancy, through raising their children alone, through building a life that didn't include him. Which meant Marcus was right. Some part of Elena still loved him, even after everything. The realization should have brought hope, but instead it made everything worse. If Elena still loved him, if she'd kept his letters and his pictures, then her revenge hadn't been about hatred. It had been about heartbreak. She'd destroyed his empire because she'd wanted to save the man she'd fallen in love with, and he'd been too blind to see it. Sophia. Elena's voice cut through the night air as she stepped onto the terrace. There you are. It's time to go, sweetheart. Already? Sophia's face fell. But I was just talking to Daddy about important stuff. I know, baby, but it's past your bedtime, and we have a long drive tomorrow. Elena's voice was gentle with her daughter, but her eyes avoided Daniel completely. Tomorrow? Daniel stood so quickly he nearly knocked over the bench. You're leaving tomorrow? We're going home, Elena said simply, finally meeting his gaze. This was always just a visit. But Daniel's chest felt like it was caving in. The children, they just met me. We haven't had time to. Time for what, Daniel? Elena's composure finally cracked, revealing the pain she'd been hiding beneath her calculated revenge. Time for you to disrupt their lives? Time for you to make promises you can't keep because you still don't understand what being a father actually means. I want to learn. The words came out desperate, pleading. Elena, please, I know I messed up. I know I chose wrong 5 years ago, but I can change. I can be better. Can you? Elena's laugh was hollow, heartbroken. Because 3 hours ago, you invited me here to humiliate me. You wanted to parade your success in front of the woman you thought had failed. Even tonight, even seeing your children, your first instinct was to control the situation, to manage the damage to your reputation. The accusations hit home because they were true. Even as he'd fallen in love with Lucas and Sophia at first sight, part of his mind had been calculating how to minimize the scandal, how to protect his image. That's not, Daniel started, but Elena wasn't finished. You want to be a father now because it's convenient, she continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. Because your empire is collapsing and you need something to cling to. But Daniel, these aren't just your children when it suits you. They're human beings who deserve a father who chooses them first, every time, even when it's inconvenient. I would choose them, Daniel said desperately. Elena, I swear to you, I would choose them over everything. Would you? Elena stepped closer, her dark eyes blazing with 5 years of suppressed fury. Would you choose them over the profitable development deal that destroys their favorite park? Would you choose them over the partnership that requires you to fire employees with families? Would you choose them over maintaining the empire that's built on everything they'll grow up to oppose? The questions hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Daniel opened his mouth to answer, but the words died in his throat. Because Elena was right. He'd spent so many years building his identity around his wealth and power that he didn't know who he would be without them. That's what I thought, Elena said softly, the fight draining out of her voice. You still don't understand. It's not about choosing them once in some grand dramatic gesture. It's about choosing them every day in small moments when the right choice costs you something you want. Mama, Lucas appeared in the doorway, his young face troubled. Uncle Marcus says we need to go to the hotel now. Are you and Daddy fighting again? Again, as if they'd been fighting his whole life, instead of spending it apart. We're just talking, sweetheart, Elena said, but her voice was thick with unshed tears. Get your sister and tell Uncle Marcus we'll be right there. As Lucas disappeared inside, Elena turned back to Daniel with an expression of such profound sadness that it took his breath away. I didn't do this to hurt you, she said quietly. I did it because I hoped. I hoped seeing them, understanding what you'd lost, might wake up the man I fell in love with. The man who used to stay up all night talking about making the world better, who believed in something bigger than profit margins. That man is still here, Daniel said desperately. Elena, please don't take them away from me. Don't end this before it's even started. Elena studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for something she'd lost. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. If that man is still there, Daniel, then prove it. Don't tell me you can change, show me. Don't make promises about choosing them. Make choices that prove you already have. She turned to go, then paused. And Daniel, don't do it for me. Don't do it to win me back or prove a point. Do it because Lucas and Sophia deserve a father who sees them as more than a consolation prize for a failed empire. As Elena walked away, Daniel felt the full weight of his devastation settle around him like a shroud. In one night, he'd gained children and lost everything else. He'd discovered a love more powerful than anything he'd ever known, and driven away the woman who'd shown him what it meant. The terrace stretched empty around him, the city lights blurring as tears he hadn't shed in 20 years finally began to fall. Somewhere inside the ballroom, his former guests were probably dissecting the evening's drama over champagne and speculation. Tomorrow, the business world would learn that Daniel Cross had lost everything that mattered. But tonight, alone under the Manhattan sky, Daniel finally understood what he'd really lost 5 years ago, and what he'd have to become to earn it back. If it wasn't already too late. Daniel stood alone on the terrace for exactly 7 minutes after Elena walked away. Long enough for the tears to stop, for his breathing to steady, and for something fundamental to shift in his chest. When he walked back into the ballroom, his stride carried a purpose that hadn't been there before. The gala continued around him, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations carried an undercurrent of speculation, and he caught fragments as he passed. Never saw it coming. Those children. Elena Rivers played the long game. Margaret intercepted him near the bar, her face pale with controlled panic. "Sir, we need to discuss damage control. The board is already calling emergency meetings, and the press." "Cancel everything," Daniel said quietly. "Sir? Cancel the emergency meetings. Cancel the press conferences. Cancel any statements about tonight." Daniel's voice was steady, certain in a way it hadn't been in years. "There's something I need to do first." He found Elena near the coat check, helping Lucas into his jacket while Sophia chatted animatedly with Marcus about the fancy party food. They looked like what they were, a family preparing to leave, with or without him. "Elena." His voice made her freeze, then turn slowly. Whatever she saw in his expression made her go very still. "Daniel, if you're here to make another scene." "No scenes," Daniel said softly. "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." Elena glanced at the children, then back at him. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she nodded. "If I prove to you that I can change, really change, not just words but actions, would you consider letting me be part of their lives?" Elena's expression was carefully guarded. "What kind of proof are you talking about?" "The kind that can't be undone. The kind that costs everything." Daniel looked at his children, memorizing their faces. "I need to know if there's a chance, Elena. Because if there isn't, if you've already decided that I can never be the father they deserve, then I'll walk away right now. I won't disrupt their lives for my own peace of mind." The question hung between them like a bridge that could either connect their broken pieces or collapse entirely. Elena studied his face with the intense focus she'd always brought to important decisions. "Lucas, Sophia," she said finally, "go with Uncle Marcus to get the car brought around. I need to talk to your father for a moment." As the children were led away, Lucas looking back with worried eyes, Sophia waving cheerfully, Elena turned back to Daniel. "You want an honest answer?" she said quietly. "Then here it is. 5 years ago, I would have done anything to make this work. I would have compromised my values, changed my dreams, become whoever you needed me to be. But that was before I learned that love without respect is just beautiful destruction." Daniel's chest tightened, but he forced himself to listen. "Those children in there? They don't need another adult who claims to love them, but makes choices that hurt them. They don't need a father who shows up when it's convenient and disappears when being a parent conflicts with being profitable." Elena's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "So if you want to be their father, really be their father, then you need to prove you understand what that means." "What would that look like?" Daniel asked. "It would look like choosing them over everything else, every single time. It would look like building a life they can be proud of, not just wealthy from. It would look like—" Elena paused, as if deciding whether to voice her deepest fear. "It would look like becoming the man I thought you were when I fell in love with you." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were hopeful. Elena still believed that man existed somewhere inside him. "And if I prove that to you?" Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. "If I become that man?" Elena's composure finally cracked, revealing the vulnerable woman beneath the successful CEO mask. "Then maybe we could find a way to be a family. Not the way we were before, but something new. Something built on who we've become instead of who we were." The admission hung between them like a lifeline thrown across an impossible chasm. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not hope, exactly, but something more powerful. Determination. I need you to take the children home, he said suddenly. Elena's face fell. Daniel, I need you to take them home, and I need you to turn on the news tomorrow morning. Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the number he needed. Margaret, I need you to arrange a press conference for first thing tomorrow. And call legal. I want them to draft transfer documents for my entire portfolio. Elena stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. Daniel, what are you? I'm choosing them, Daniel said simply, already dialing another number. Richard? Yes, I know it's late. I want to make an offer on the Patterson Holdings. No, not through Cross Industries. Personal acquisition. And Richard? I want to convert every development project to environmental restoration. Yes, every single one. Elena's eyes widened as the implications hit her. Daniel was systematically dismantling his own empire, converting profit-driven development into the kind of environmental protection she'd always championed. Daniel, stop, she said urgently. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Daniel ended the call and looked at her with absolute certainty. Elena, for 15 years I've been building monuments to my own ego and calling it success. But success doesn't hold your hand when you're scared. Success doesn't laugh at your jokes or worry about ocean conservation or stand on your feet to dance. His voice grew stronger with each word. I can't undo 5 years of their lives that I missed. I can't take back the ways I hurt you or the choices I made that drove you away. But I can choose, right now, to become the father they deserve and the man you fell in love with. Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she watched him systematically destroy everything he'd spent his adult life building. The money doesn't matter, Daniel continued, still making calls, still transferring assets. The power doesn't matter. The reputation doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is in that car with Marcus, wondering if their daddy is going to choose them or choose his empire. Daniel, I choose them, Daniel said fiercely, ending another call. I choose them over profit, over convenience, over everything I thought I wanted. I choose bedtime stories and soccer games and school plays and protecting the world they're going to inherit. Elena was sobbing now, 5 years of carefully controlled emotion finally breaking free. You're giving up everything. No, Daniel said softly, reaching out to touch her face with gentle fingers. I'm finally getting everything that matters. The moment stretched between them, 15 years of love and loss and regret crystallizing into something that felt like forgiveness. But before either could speak, Lucas appeared at Elena's elbow. Mama, Uncle Marcus sent me to check on you because you were taking a really long time and… Lucas stopped, his young face creasing with concern as he took in his mother's tears. Why is Mama crying? Did you make her sad again? The accusation in Lucas's voice was like a knife to Daniel's heart, but he knelt to his son's level with steady hands. No, buddy. I think maybe I made her happy. But sometimes happy crying and sad crying look the same on the outside. Lucas studied both adults with the serious intensity he'd inherited from his father. Are you going to be our daddy for real now? Not just for tonight. The question was so direct, so trusting, that Daniel felt his throat close up. Would you like me to be? I think so, Lucas said carefully. But you have to promise not to disappear again. And you have to learn about ocean conservation, because Sophia will quiz you. And you have to like Uncle Marcus, because he's family too. Each condition was delivered with 5-year-old solemnity, as if Lucas had been preparing for this conversation his entire life. Which Daniel realized he probably had. I promise all of that, Daniel said solemnly, extending his hand for another formal handshake. And Lucas? I promise to choose you and Sophia over everything else, every single time. Lucas considered this for a moment, then surprised Daniel by stepping forward into a hug instead of a handshake. Good, he said matter-of-factly against Daniel's chest. Because we've been waiting for you for a really long time. As Daniel held his son for the first time, breathing in the scent of childhood and possibility, he felt the last piece of his old life fall away. Tomorrow, he would wake up significantly less wealthy but infinitely richer. He would face congressional hearings, board revolts, and probably a complete restructuring of his professional life. But tonight, as Sophia ran back into the ballroom demanding her turn for daddy hugs, Daniel Cross finally understood what success actually looked like. It looked like 2 children who trusted him enough to call him family, and a woman who loved him enough to let him try to deserve it. 6 weeks later, Daniel stood in a place he never thought he'd see again. the wetlands preserve where Elena's grandmother had taught her to paint, where 3 generations of her family had found peace, where Cross Industries had once planned to build a luxury shopping complex. Now, instead of construction equipment, the land hosted a different kind of machinery. Restoration vehicles planting native grasses, scientists monitoring water quality, and photographers documenting the return of wildlife that had been displaced for years. "The great blue heron nested here again," Elena said softly, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee steaming in the November air. "First time in 5 years." Daniel accepted the coffee, his hands still learning the simple intimacy of sharing quiet moments with the woman who'd once been the center of his world. They'd been rebuilding slowly, carefully, learning each other again while learning to be parents together. "The wetlands restoration is ahead of schedule," he said, consulting the tablet that had replaced phone calls as his primary tool. "And the carbon offset program is attracting interest from 3 major corporations." "Look at you," Elena smiled, the expression warm and real in a way it hadn't been 6 weeks ago. "Talking about carbon offsets like you once talked about profit margins." "Profit margins are easier," Daniel admitted. "Carbon offsets require you to think about the world your children will inherit." The transformation hadn't been easy. The press conference announcing his business restructuring had sent shockwaves through Manhattan's financial district. His net worth had dropped by 60% overnight, 3 board members had resigned, and Victoria Ashford had publicly called him a man having an expensive midlife crisis. But something unexpected had happened in the weeks that followed. Younger investors, environmental groups, and forward-thinking corporations had begun reaching out. Daniel's pivot from development to restoration had positioned him at the forefront of a growing movement toward sustainable business practices. Rivers Cross Environmental Solutions, the company Elena had agreed to co-found with him, had a client waiting list that stretched into next year. "Daddy, Mama," Sophia's voice carried across the preserve as she raced toward them, her boots splashing through the shallow water they'd helped restore. Uncle Marcus found frog eggs. Real ones. Lucas followed more sedately, his hands cupped carefully around something precious. "Look," he said seriously, opening his palms to reveal a cluster of tiny, translucent spheres. "There'll be tadpoles soon, and then frogs. Uncle Marcus says this is the circle of life." Daniel knelt to examine his son's treasure, still marveling at how Lucas approached everything with such thoughtful intensity. "That's incredible, buddy. Your mama painted this exact spot when she was about your age." "I know," Lucas said matter-of-factly. "She showed me. That's why I wanted to bring the frog eggs here, so they could grow up in the same place where Mama learned to love nature." The simple wisdom in his 5-year-old son's words hit Daniel with surprising force. This place had shaped Elena's values, had been the foundation of their original conflict, and now it was where their children would learn to love the world they'd pledged to protect. Marcus appeared through the tall grasses, his clothes splattered with mud, and his face alight with the kind of joy Daniel had learned to associate with environmental victory. The sight of Marcus no longer triggered jealousy. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, Daniel had understood that Marcus wasn't his rival for Elena's affections, but his partner in loving the same family. "The water quality tests came back," Marcus announced, grinning broadly. "Not only are we back to pre-development levels, we're actually higher than historical baselines. This preserve is going to be a model for restoration projects nationwide." "That's incredible," Elena breathed, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. "It gets better," Marcus continued, pulling out his phone to show them a video call screen. "Tell them what you told me, Dr. Rodriguez." The screen showed Dr. Maria Rodriguez, the environmental scientist whose research Elena had been trying to protect 5 years ago. "Elena, Daniel, I can't believe what you've accomplished here. The biodiversity recovery is unprecedented. We're seeing species return that we thought were permanently displaced." Daniel felt something shift in his chest as he watched Elena's face light up with pure joy. This had been her dream from the beginning, not just to stop destruction, but to create restoration, to build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been lost. "But there's more," Dr. Rodriguez continued, her excitement palpable even through the phone screen. "The success of this preserve has attracted attention from the Department of Environmental Protection. They want to offer Rivers Cross the lead contract for the Atlantic Coastal Restoration Initiative. It's a 5-year, $100 million project to restore damaged ecosystems along the entire eastern seaboard." The silence that followed was profound. Elena's hand found Daniel's, their fingers interlacing with the ease that had taken weeks to redevelop. $100 million, Elena whispered. To do the work we love, to protect the places that matter. To build the world our children deserve, Daniel added, looking at Lucas and Sophia, who were now helping Marcus collect water samples with the serious concentration of junior scientists. There's one condition, Dr. Rodriguez continued, her tone becoming formal. The project requires both your signatures. The department specifically requested that Rivers Cross maintain its dual leadership structure. They believe the combination of Elena's environmental expertise and Daniel's business acumen is exactly what this initiative needs. Daniel felt Elena's hand tighten in his, understanding the weight of what Dr. Rodriguez was offering. This wasn't just a business contract. It was validation that their partnership, their rebuilt relationship, their choice to co-parent and co-lead, could create something larger than either of them could accomplish alone. We'll need to discuss it, Elena said carefully, though her voice carried barely contained excitement. Of course. But Elena? Daniel? The department isn't just buying your expertise. They're buying your story. The idea that people can change, that love can triumph over greed, that families can rebuild themselves into something stronger than they were before. That's the kind of hope this country needs right now. As the call ended, Daniel found himself facing Elena with an emotion he couldn't name. It wasn't just love, though love was part of it. It wasn't just gratitude, though he'd never stopped being grateful for her forgiveness. It was something bigger, the recognition that they'd created something together that was more powerful than either of them alone. $100 million, Elena said again, her voice wondering. To save the world, Daniel replied, then caught himself. To save parts of it, anyway. To show Lucas and Sophia that adults can keep their promises. Daniel, Elena's voice carried a strange note, something between laughter and tears. There's something I need to tell you. About that night 6 weeks ago, about the gala, about all of it. Daniel felt his chest tighten. In 6 weeks of rebuilding their relationship, they'd talked about everything. His mistakes, her pain, their hopes for the future. But Elena's tone suggested there was something significant they'd never discussed. What is it? He asked gently. Elena looked out over the preserve, watching their children splash through the water with Marcus, before turning back to Daniel with an expression he couldn't read. The revenge wasn't supposed to work, she said quietly. The hostile takeover, the public humiliation, the destruction of your empire. I never intended for any of it to actually succeed. Daniel stared at her, not understanding. What do you mean? I had contingency plans. Safety nets. Ways to reverse everything if you'd chosen your reputation over our children. Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued. Marcus knew. The shell companies, the stock acquisitions, even the Patterson merger, we built escape clauses into everything. If you'd walked away that night, if you'd chosen your empire over Lucas and Sophia, I was prepared to give it all back and disappear with the children. The revelation hit Daniel like a physical blow. You weren't actually trying to destroy me? I was trying to save you, Elena said simply. The man I fell in love with was still in there somewhere, buried under years of wealth and ego and isolation. I gambled everything on the possibility that meeting your children, understanding what real love looked like, might wake him up. Daniel's knees felt weak. And if it hadn't worked? Then you would have kept your empire, and Lucas and Sophia would have kept their peace. We would have disappeared, and you never would have seen us again. Elena's voice was steady, but her eyes held the weight of a decision that could have destroyed all of them. I risked everything on the hope that you were still the man who once promised to change the world with me. The magnitude of her faith, her love, her desperate hope that he could become worthy of their children, overwhelmed Daniel completely. She hadn't been seeking revenge. She'd been offering redemption, with no guarantee that he'd be wise enough to take it. Elena, he whispered, his voice breaking. But you chose them, she continued, stepping closer. You chose Lucas and Sophia over everything else, and that choice changed everything. Not just for us, but for all of this. She gestured to the preserve, to their children playing in the restored wetlands, to the future they were building together. Your choice to love them completely created the foundation for all of this. Daniel reached for her then, pulling her into his arms with the desperate gratitude of a man who'd been given a gift he'd never deserved. I love you, he said against her hair. I love all of you, more than I ever thought possible. I know, Elena whispered back. And Daniel, I love you too. Not the man you were, not the man you might become, but the man you are right now. The man who chose his children over his empire. The man who's teaching Lucas to value integrity and showing Sophia that dreams can come true when you're brave enough to fight for them. As they held each other in the place where their love had been born and broken and reborn, Daniel understood that this was the real victory. Not the business success, not the environmental triumph, not even the restoration of their relationship. The real victory was standing knee-deep in clean water while their children discovered the magic of a world worth protecting, surrounded by the family they'd almost lost and the future they'd chosen to build together. 1 year later, Daniel stood in the same boardroom where he'd once planned Elena's humiliation, but everything had changed. The mahogany table remained, but the walls now displayed photographs of restored ecosystems instead of acquisition trophies. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out on the same Manhattan skyline, but Daniel's attention was focused on the video call that connected him to restoration sites across 3 states. The Delaware Bay restoration is exceeding all projections, Dr. Martinez reported from the field station. Her image slightly pixelated, but her excitement unmistakable. Oyster populations are up 400%, and we're seeing species return that haven't been documented here in decades. The economic impact is equally impressive, added Sarah Chin, Marcus's sister and Rivers Cross's new CFO. Local fishing communities are reporting their best catches in 20 years. The restoration isn't just healing the environment, it's revitalizing entire communities. Daniel smiled, making notes on his tablet. What about the main project? Ahead of schedule and under budget, came the response from their northern team. The governor wants to discuss expanding our contract to include coastal protection against climate change impacts. A soft knock at the conference room door made Daniel look up. Elena peered in, her face glowing with the particular radiance she'd carried for the past 3 months. The glow that came from the life they'd created together growing inside her. Sorry to interrupt, she said softly, but someone has an important announcement. Sophia burst through the door with 6-year-old exuberance, her school backpack still bouncing against her shoulders. Daddy, I got picked for the marine biology summer camp. The one at the aquarium. Daniel's face lit up as he scooped his daughter into his arms, spinning her around the boardroom that had once been a temple to corporate ruthlessness and was now the headquarters of environmental restoration. That's incredible, princess. Tell me everything. Well, Sophia began with the serious tone she used for important announcements. I have to write an essay about why protecting oceans matters, and I'm going to write about how you and Mama turned from hurting the environment to helping it, and how love makes people want to build better things. The simple wisdom in his daughter's words hit Daniel with the same force it had a year ago. These children, his children, had inherited Elena's values and his determination, but they'd grown up understanding that real strength came from protecting the vulnerable, not dominating them. And Lucas has news too, Elena added, settling into the chair beside Daniel's as their son appeared in the doorway, his face glowing with quiet pride. I won the science fair, Lucas announced with characteristic understatement. My project on wetland restoration and its impact on carbon sequestration took first place. The judges said it was remarkably sophisticated for a first grader. Daniel felt his chest swell with pride so fierce it was almost painful. His son had won a science fair with research that mirrored the work Rivers Cross was doing professionally. At 6 years old, Lucas was already following in their footsteps, understanding that science and environmental protection were tools for building a better world. Mr. Cross, Dr. Martinez's voice from the video call reminded Daniel that the meeting was still in session. Should we continue the briefing? Actually, Daniel said, looking around the room at his Real board of directors, his wife, his children, the team of scientists and economists who'd helped him rebuild his life around purpose instead of profit. I think we should adjourn. It's Friday afternoon, and I have a soccer game to attend. The team smiled and began logging off, accustomed to Daniel's new priorities. In the old days, business would have trumped everything. Now, Lucas's soccer games and Sophia's piano recitals took precedence over conference calls and client meetings. Besides, Daniel continued, pulling Elena closer as the children settled into the oversized chairs around the conference table, we have something more important to discuss. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Not the cruel invitation he'd drafted a year ago, but something infinitely more precious. The ultrasound photo from that morning's appointment, showing the healthy baby who would join their family in 5 months. We wanted to tell you two together, Elena said softly, taking Sophia's hand while Daniel ruffled Lucas's hair. You're going to have a little brother or sister. The children erupted in excitement, their questions tumbling over each other. When? Can we help pick names? Will the baby like ocean conservation too? As Daniel watched his family celebrate the news of their expanding circle, he felt the same profound shift in his chest that had begun the night Elena walked back into his life. But now, instead of devastation, it was complete fulfillment, the recognition that he'd finally learned what success actually meant. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, who was at their satellite office in Portland. Saw the news about the main expansion. Congratulations, partner. Also, Sarah's pregnant too, due a month after Elena. Looks like our kids will grow up together. Daniel smiled, showing the message to Elena. The man he'd once fired in anger had become his closest friend and business partner, their shared love for Elena and the children creating a bond that transcended their complicated history. You know what this means, Elena said, reading over his shoulder. What? Marcus and Sarah's baby will be practically the same age as ours. Our children will grow up with built-in best friends, raised by parents who believe in protecting the world instead of exploiting it. The vision hit Daniel with startling clarity. A generation of children raised to see environmental protection and economic success as complementary rather than competing forces. Kids who would grow up assuming that business should heal rather than harm, that wealth should protect rather than destroy. Daddy, Sophia said thoughtfully, climbing into his lap with the easy affection that still amazed him. Remember when you used to build things that hurt the environment? I do, sweetheart. That was before I understood what really mattered. And now you build things that help, Lucas added with satisfaction. Uncle Marcus says that's called redemption. Uncle Marcus is very wise, Daniel agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Will our new baby brother or sister get to grow up only knowing the good daddy? Sophia asked. The one who protects oceans and loves families? The question stopped Daniel's breath entirely. His unborn child would never know the man who'd prioritized profit over people, who'd built an empire on environmental destruction, who'd been too proud to recognize love when it stood right in front of him. This baby would grow up with bedtime stories about restoration rather than acquisition, with lullabies about protecting the world rather than conquering it. Yes, Daniel said softly, pressing a kiss to Sophia's forehead. This baby will only know the daddy who learned that the most important thing you can build is a family that loves each other and protects the world together. Elena's hand found his across the conference table, their wedding rings, exchanged 6 months ago in a ceremony on the restored wetlands where they'd fallen in love, catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. And this baby will grow up knowing that people can change, Elena added gently. That love is stronger than pride, that family is more valuable than fortune, and that it's never too late to choose what really matters. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and coral, Daniel looked around the boardroom that had once been the center of his empty empire and saw it transformed into the headquarters of everything that mattered. Family, purpose, hope for the future. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Dr. Rodriguez with photos from the latest preserve inspection. The images showed crystal clear water, thriving wildlife, and families enjoying the natural spaces that Rivers Cross had helped restore. But the last photo was the one that stopped his heart. A great blue heron standing in the exact spot where Elena's grandmother had once taught her to paint, where 3 generations of women had learned to love the natural world, where Daniel had finally learned to love something bigger than himself. The bird stood like a sentinel, like a promise, like proof that some things could be healed if you loved them enough to try. Look, Daniel whispered, showing the image to his family. She's come home. And as they sat together in the golden light, surrounded by the evidence of what they'd built and the promise of what they'd continue building, Daniel Cross finally understood that he'd found the only success that mattered. A love that could transform even the most broken things into something beautiful. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibility and grounded in the knowledge that some victories were worth any sacrifice, especially the victory of becoming the people your children need you to be. What did this story teach you about the power of choosing love over pride, and the possibility that even the most broken relationships can be healed when we're brave enough to prioritize what truly matters? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. Because sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with the courage to admit we've been wrong about what success really means.